Disturbing things caught in elevators. More than an elevator failing, many people fear being trapped in one. People are afraid of this happening for meter seconds, but what about 41 hours? That's what happened to Nicholas White, whose elevator got stuck in the middle of its trip. 41 hours, and there was nothing he could do to help himself. Quickly, he begins to run around erratically. At about 4 hours, the man lies down, waiting to see what happens next. We can see maintenance trying to get him in the other elevator shots. By 20 hours, they've made no real progress. The man begins messing with things from his pockets before opening the doors. At about 34 hours, he climbs, seemingly looking for another way out. Clearly not satisfied or otherwise unable, he continues his cycle of laying down, running around, pacing, prying the doors open, and so much more. Before the 41-hour mark, he's finally released from this unfortunate circumstance, and they block the elevator off from further use.
Dirty facts about history that school probably didn't teach you, part 14. Philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau would hide in alleyways, pull his pants down, and jump scare women ass first in hopes they would get scared and spank him in self-defense. Apparently, this was his kink. A famous Irish pirate named Anne Bonny would fight with one boob out just to show that not only are you about to get murdered, but you're about to get murdered by an 18-year-old girl. Oh, this? This is my murder titty. York. The only slave on the Lewis and Clark expedition was a sensation among indigenous American women. They found the guy quite attractive, and he would tell them that he was part bear so they would sleep with him in hopes of producing a bear warrior baby. LBJ used to take out his pee-pee and show people how big it was. He referred to it as jumbo, and here's a phone call of him complaining to a clothing company that their pants were too tight on his Ladybird Lance.
Hang the crotch down where your nuts hang is always a little too tight. If you can't leave me about an inch from where the zipper ends, round under my, back to my bunghole.
Jameson family is unlike anything you have heard. So this family right here, the Jameson family with the two parents and their 6-year-old daughter, for an unknown reason, they just packed their truck in 2009 and they had these plans to live in a storage unit, like on a plot of land. We would end up getting this security camera footage that was retained from their home, where they packed the truck and they did so completely silent, like they were in a trance or something. So the family does go missing after this day, but their truck is found abandoned and locked. It's really eerie because inside of this truck there was like 32 grand, all of their belongings, and their family dog was still in the truck alive. They end up finding the father's cell phone, and that's when they find something really disturbing. There's a picture of his 6-year-old daughter on the day they left, and she's just standing completely alone in the woods, just screaming, and nobody knows why he took this picture. 4 years later, all 3 bodies were found 3 miles away in the woods, and no one knows what happened to them or why they left.
Disturbing facts that will ruin your life. When whales reach a certain age, they will eventually be too weak to swim back to the surface for air, so they will just suffocate to death and eventually sink to the bottom of the ocean. When you die, you will be aware that you are dead until the moment your brain fully ceases function. When getting laser eye surgery, you can smell the parts of your eyes being shaved down. During the French Revolution, where the guillotine was introduced, the people to be executed fought to be first, as the blade would dull after multiple uses, and wouldn't cut a head clean off at the first attempt. If you're male, after you die, your loved ones can have a doctor electrocute your prostate to force you to ejaculate for sperm. Humans have enough bite power to bite off their own finger, bone and all. The only thing stopping us is our brain's natural safety factor. A deceased human body can take between 24 to 48 hours to decompress, releasing the remaining blood, urine, and fecal matter, depending on the situation, position, and method of death. If you die on a submarine, they put your body in the fridge with all the food. If not, up a torpedo tube. It's actually common that corpses will periodically burp, fart, gasp, groan as gases escape through the mouth and anus. When you get burned by electricity, it actually leaves marks shaped like lightning on your skin. Hit the plus sign if you want to learn more facts.
This is the scary story about the broken down car. There was a man named Alex who never got an Uber before. He didn't trust them and was honestly scared of strangers. But one day his car broke down, and in a last resort he called an Uber. When the Uber got there, it was an old elderly man. Alex then got in the car and said hello. The man then said, "If you're thirsty, I have some water bottles back there." Alex was super thirsty and immediately drank the whole bottle. But seconds later, he passed out. When Alex woke up, he found himself in a small creepy room with both of his hands chained to the wall and his left leg cut off. Alex then began screaming hysterically, and suddenly the old man came into the room and said, "You better get used to this place, my friend, because you're going to die here."
Scary things caught on camera. Bailey is a TikTok user who works in a so-called haunted theater. As the story goes, the owner of the theater apparently died 30 years ago in a tragic accident and still haunts his theater to this day. One night when Bailey is alone in his job, he finds something terrifying. Take a look.
Alright guys, so I work at this old theater and I've been hearing a noise. What is that?
Follow if you saw anything.
These are some of the most disturbing things ever found on the dark web, part 1. And this video is going to give you a clear example as to why not to send nude photos, ever. Today we're going to be talking about the website called pinkmeth, and it doesn't involve drugs. Pinkmeth was basically a marketplace and a website for men where they would go and sell their ex's nude photos for revenge and for a large amount of money. And if you thought that was the worst part, keep watching. These men would post literally anything they knew about you, even stuff that you didn't even know they knew. And I'm not kidding, these guys literally had full list of your personal information, whether that be your phone number, your home address, or even your family's private information. They would do anything to get dirt on your name. They don't care about how you're feeling, what it's going to do to your reputation, or anything like that. In fact, they all want one thing: money. The men would send the women's ransom nude photos to them and say, either you pay up the money or I'm gonna let the dark web do whatever they want with your private information. So this is why I urge you, don't do it.
November 3rd, 2018, Tamla Horsford, a 40-year-old mother of 5, was having a slumber party with her group of friends who called themselves football moms. The following morning, police found Tamla dead in the backyard, covered in multiple bruises. Police ruled the death as an accident, stating that she'd most likely fallen off the porch while intoxicated. However, Tamla's family was unsure, so they had a second autopsy done which showed that she had several cuts to her arms and legs as well. This finding, along with strange differences in the witness testimonies and a confusing log of the back door of the house opening and closing repeatedly, led the family to believe that their mother's death was not an accident, it was homicide. Because of the movement protesting the murder of George Floyd, the case was reopened, but still, it was ruled an accident.
This is the most dangerous movie ever made. This movie is called Roar, and the cast and crew of this movie endured monstrous dangers, both on camera and off. Malini Griffith was mauled near her eyes and needed plastic surgery. A man named Hendren contacted gangrene and needed skin grafts. Another person named Marshall was mauled by the lion repeatedly and had very bad blood poisoning. The cinematographer John DeBont had his scalp torn off and needed more than 120 stitches. Over 100 people were injured or severely hurt during the making of this movie, which is why it has the name of the most dangerous movie ever made. If you ever decide to watch this movie, most of the blood that you see on screen is actually 100% real.
True crime.
Jeffrey Dahmer.
Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer, May 21, 1960, November 28, 1994.
Also known as the Milwaukee Cannibal or the Milwaukee Monster.
Jeffrey was an American serial killer and sex offender who committed the murder and dismemberment of 17 men and boys between 1978 and 1991.
Many of his later murders involved necrophilia, cannibalism, and the permanent preservation of body parts, typically all or part of the skeleton.
Although he was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, schizotypal personality disorder, and a psychotic disorder, Dahmer was found to be legally sane at his trial.
He was convicted of 15 of the 16 murders he had committed in Wisconsin and was sentenced to 15 terms of life imprisonment on February 17, 1992.
Dahmer was later sentenced to a 16th term of life imprisonment for an additional homicide committed in Ohio in 1978.
On November 28, 1994, Dahmer was beaten to death by Christopher Scarver, a fellow inmate at the Columbia Correctional Institution in Portage, Wisconsin.
Happy New Year. This is a true dark web story, part 4. Paul, a 19-year-old from Germany. Paul is a heavy weed smoker. He's done research on all types of drugs. He likes to experience new things. He tends to stay away from addictive drugs and uses other ones for spiritual purposes. Paul is also always on one of the deep web chats almost every night. And he has anonymous friends that are regulars on that same chat. A new user joined this chat room for the first time. Some people greeted him, some were making fun of his username, and some were very sketched out. This anonymous user sent a Tor link without describing what the website is about. After he sent the link, he just left the chat room. Paul was the only one curious about that link. He opens the link and it takes him to a website that introduces a new psychedelic drug that comes in forms of pills. As he reads more about this drug, he scrolls down and reads the offer. Your first order is on the house. We know you'll come back for more. He was mind blown that there was a free trial for this drug. He checks out his free package, puts a fake name and a fake address somewhere near his house in his city. Paul just didn't want to be traced. 4 days later, on a Saturday evening, someone knocks Paul's house door. He opens the door and sees only a box on the porch. There was a note on the box that says, "Dear Paul, we wanted to offer the best service and deliver it to your home ourselves." At this point, Paul knew this was very serious. He started panicking after finding out they know his real name and they have his real address. He runs to his PC, finding that that link that was shared in that chat room that day by the anonymous user doesn't work anymore. Beneath the box, there was a local number, and under it says, "WhatsApp to order more." Paul felt like this was a setup. He burned all the pills, and he never opened any random links from any deep web chat room.
These are some extremely unsettling facts, and I found all of these on Reddit. In my last video I talked about the Wizard of Oz and the urban legend attached to the movie, but the darkness behind this cursed film goes much deeper than that. Actress Judy Garland went through hell in the filming of this movie. First, it was deemed by the filming team that Judy's breasts were way too big, so they would bound them down by using tape and whatever means necessary, and it was extremely painful. On top of that, she would be working 16-hour days, and to keep her energy up, they would give her speed, and at nighttime when she needed to sleep, they would give her sleeping pills. This caused Judy to build a dependency on these drugs, and it took a while for her to feel better from it. Just terrible. Now chances are we all know what an Amber Alert is. It's an extremely helpful way for society to help find kidnapped children. But there's a really dark side behind this. After a study that was done, it was shown that a lot of kidnappers actually received these Amber Alerts as well, as you could have guessed. But the thing is, when they receive these Amber Alerts, some kidnappers will panic and kill the child on impulse. And finally, Japan has a very dark secret. But before I get into that, if you guys want a nice positive surprise, make sure to peep my bio. You won't regret it. There was a brutal Japanese human experimentation group that was known as Unit 731. This group had horrible things done to them. They would have their limbs cut off, they would be fed specific poisons, all to see how long it would take for them to die. And all of this was done without anesthesia. Just awful to think about. And I'm sure all of these were awful to think about, and I'm sorry, but that's why.
So suspicious and so bizarre. This is the mysterious case of Debbie Collier. On Saturday, September 10th, 59-year-old Debbie Collier was reported missing by her husband Steve after she left home earlier that day and never returned. Debbie worked for a realty company in Athens, and Steve described his wife as a wonderful person. Chillingly, that day, Debbie's daughter Amanda said she received a cryptic and strange message from her mother saying, "They aren't going to let me go, love you, there's a key to the house underneath the flower pot," and then sent her daughter over $2,000 through Venmo. The very next day, Debbie was found bare in a wooded ravine clinging to a tree. Near her was a burned tarp and a tote bag. The whole scene was tragic. Debbie was gone. And nothing about any of this made any sense. Then, surveillance footage surfaced which showed Debbie in a Family Dollar store the day before she was found buying a tarp, a torch lighter, a rain poncho, and a reusable tote bag. Even stranger, workers at the store said that Debbie didn't appear distressed and was alone. The footage showed Debbie leaving the store, getting into her van, where she sat for 10 minutes and then drove off. And it was around this time that Amanda said she received that message and Venmo payment from her mom. Deputies are saying that they believe that what happened to Debbie was deliberate and personal. Also, neighbors told police that they heard yelling coming from Debbie's home the night before she went missing. Police do not believe that this was a kidnapping or that Debbie did this on her own. Strange and mysterious, and we're watching it all unfold as we speak. What are your thoughts on this case?
I really want to talk about this photo. A security guard at the Bryson Avenue Mall located in Virginia took this photo in 2011. It would later be turned into police, but the woman seen here was never found. For context, the security guard's name was Sean Mercado, and he worked the night shift at this mall. But the mall had been having strange things happening for weeks. On after hours, there are store alarms going off, but nobody's ever found. They're hearing people run through the mall, but again, they never see anybody. Until one night when Sean Mercado goes out to have a cigarette, he's just kind of patrolling the parking lot, and he goes back to enter through the employee entrance when he saw this woman staring back at him from inside the mall. He takes a photo for proof, and then he radios for backup, and he goes in after her. He claimed to chase her as fast as he could, but he eventually lost her inside that mall. And despite a police investigation, she would never be found.
Everybody on Earth is actually dead. Okay, so it's said that after you die, your brain lives on for an extra 7 minutes and recreates your memories in a dreamlike state, flashing your entire life before you. As time moves differently when we're awake, rather than in our dreams, 7 minutes can feel like 7 minutes or 100 years. Stephen Hawking actually said when we find the God particle, the world could end in a day. And in 2012, we found it. What if the world did actually end in 2012, in an instant, and we've been living in our consciousness? And maybe that's the reason since the year 2012, the world has gotten so much weirder. This is insane, and it's definitely going to keep me up tonight.
Scary things experienced by night shift workers. Anonymous said that he used to work as a graveyard custodian in a building by himself. Now, when he started, he was told that the building was very weird and that he should stay on his toes. He called bull, but after working there a year, he was pretty convinced that something weird was going on. He was riding the elevator to a different floor, but instead of going to that floor, it went straight to the basement. The doors open, and all of the sudden, a dark figure starts walking towards the elevator, and he freaks out. He hit the doors to close, and the figure just kept getting closer. He ended up standing outside of the building for a half an hour or so while the police searched the basement. What really freaked him out was that the one entrance into the basement was locked and barred, and they didn't find anyone down there after searching everywhere.
These are some extremely unsettling facts. Sudden death syndrome is a terrifying condition that plagues the earth today, and it could happen to any one of you. Essentially, sudden death syndrome is when someone will go to bed seemingly completely healthy and randomly experience an arrhythmia or an irregular heartbeat in their sleep, which will cause them to die. The scariest part is you will have no prior symptoms. It will just randomly happen. Let's say randomly you got your head cut off. Pretty random thing to think about, but I have 2.6 million followers, so I mean, it's bound to happen to one of you, I guess. Well, as scary as this sounds, the human brain actually typically remains conscious for around 10 seconds after it's been decapitated. Right now, the world is suffering from a thing called global warming. If you don't believe in it, I don't have the energy to argue with you. But this is scary for a multitude of reasons. There's a lot of diseases that are trapped within the glaciers of the world right now, and as they slowly start to melt away, those diseases are going to disperse among the planet, which could be terrible. And look, I know these are some really dark things, and I'm sure you didn't want to hear about this, but that's why.
Doubt a lot of people do, but does anybody recognize these names? names: Michelle Gusset, Lori Farmer, and Denise Milner. These were the Girl Scouts who were attending Camp Scott in Mays County, Oklahoma when something went very wrong. One of the counselors reported hearing this strange and kind of low guttural noise in the woods during that night. And by the morning of June 13th, 1977, all 3 of these girls were found missing from their tent. The 3 of them were later found bludgeoned under a tree. You really have to understand, the county had never seen something like this. Ever. Something so gruesome, and all 3 of these girls being assaulted. But then police found something strange. In a cave outside of the camp, there were key pieces of evidence as well as 2 pictures. Pictures that were traced back to their development and led to only one man, Gene Leroy Hart. He was a horribly violent man with a dark history of assault. Police closed in on him, and although there's evidence he was involved, he is eventually acquitted of the charges.
I'm in the river, and I'm having a baptism. Let's just let her go. Oh my god, wait, actually no. But anyways, I'm in the river. I hope there's like, I keep hearing like voices, but I hope there's not like a man out here.
Man was sending emails from his grave. In November of 2011, a man named Tim Hart was perusing his emails when his inbox suddenly filled with a message. His friend had sent him an email. However, not just anybody, but one who had passed away 5 months earlier and went by the name of Jack Froese. Simply put, the subject said, "I'm watching." And the email's body read, "Did you hear me? I'm at your house. Clean your effing attic." According to Hart, the second to last time Froese had visited his home prior to his death, they went up to the attic and made jokes about how filthy it was. Another email from Froese was then received by Jimmy McGraw, Jack Froese's cousin. The subject simply said, "Hey Jim," and the email following it read, "How you're doing? I knew you were gonna break your ankle. Tried to warn you, gotta be careful." The thing that made this email particularly eerie was the fact that McGraw had indeed broke his ankle while heading out to work one morning. But this only happened after Froese had passed away. How could Froese have sent this email with knowledge of an event that took place after his death?
The horror story from Japan. It is said that there was a girl who was visiting her grandparents' house in the village. One day she was playing in the forest near the temple. Suddenly, she could hear a voice coming from behind the trees. In front of her, a very tall woman appeared. The girl immediately ran away in fear and told the incident to her grandmother. Her grandfather then called his son to pick up his granddaughter. It turns out that the figure she meets is Hachishaki-sama, a terrible female spirit who likes to kidnap children. Her grandmother said she should be locked in a room and she shouldn't open the door until sunrise. In the middle of the night, she heard her grandfather's voice asking her to open the door. Luckily, she followed her grandmother's advice. And the woman's voice she had heard in the forest appeared again from behind the door. Sure enough, it wasn't her grandfather's voice who's been calling her, but Hachishaki-sama's. Luckily, she survived until the next day. She immediately went home and never returned to the village.